The resignation letter was only 3 words long. "I can't anymore." Marcus Rivera had been Tom Brady's private chef for 8 years, crafting every meal that fueled the greatest quarterback comeback in NFL history. He'd seen Tom at his highest peaks and lowest valleys, but nothing had prepared him for what he discovered in that locked basement room. What started as a simple quest to find extra storage space would uncover a secret so devastating that it would shake Marcus to his core and force him to make an impossible choice between loyalty and truth. Because sometimes the people we admire most are hiding the darkest secrets, and sometimes those secrets are worth more than any amount of money or fame can buy. Marcus had always prided himself on being invisible. In 8 years of working for the Brady family, he perfected the art of moving through their Brookline mansion like a ghost, preparing Tom's strict TB12 diet without ever intruding on the family's private moments. Avocado ice cream at 6 a.m., alkaline water measured to the exact ounce, anti-inflammatory smoothies that tasted like liquid cardboard but kept Tom's 45-year-old body performing like a machine. The job had been a dream come true for Marcus, a culinary school dropout from East Boston who'd worked his way up from washing dishes at Legal Seafoods to becoming the personal chef for the greatest quarterback who ever lived. Tom treated him well, paid him generously, and never once made him feel like hired help. The Brady family had even invited him to their Super Bowl celebrations, treating him like part of the family. But on that cold February night in 2023, everything changed. Marcus was working late, preparing Tom's post-workout recovery meals for the next day. The house was unusually quiet. Giselle was in Brazil for a photo shoot, and Tom was at the facility reviewing game film. Marcus loved these peaceful moments in the sprawling kitchen. We could work without interruption, lost in the rhythm of chopping and seasoning. That's when he heard it, a faint beeping sound coming from somewhere below his feet. At first, he thought it might be the wine cellar's temperature control system, but the sound was different, more urgent, like an alarm that had been muffled by thick walls. Marcus had never been in the basement beyond the wine cellar. The rest of the lower level was off limits, something Tom had made clear from day one. Just storage and old gym equipment, Tom had said with that easy smile of his. Nothing interesting down there, trust me. But curiosity and concern got the better of Marcus. What if there was a fire alarm going off? What if something was wrong with the house's systems? He couldn't just ignore it. The basement stairs creaked under his feet as he descended, following the beeping sound down a hallway he'd never explored. The walls were lined with family photos, Tom and Giselle's wedding, vacation pictures, moments of happiness that made Marcus smile even in his growing unease. The beeping grew louder as he approached a heavy oak door at the end of the hall. The door was locked, but the spare key was hanging on a hook nearby, almost like Tom wanted someone to find eventually. Marcus hesitated, his hand hovering over the key. This was a violation of trust. He knew that, but the beeping was insistent now, and a concern for the house overrode his guilt. The key turned easily in the lock. What Marcus found inside, that room would haunt him for the rest of his life. The space was larger than he'd expected, with concrete walls and no windows. But it wasn't the size that made his blood run cold. It was what filled the room. Dozens of computer monitors lined the walls, each one showing a different feed. Security cameras, Marcus realized, but not of the Brady property. These were showing the interiors of other homes, other lives being lived in private moments they never knew were being watched. In the center of the room sat a desk covered with files, photographs, and what looked like financial documents. Marcus moved closer, his hands shaking as he picked up one of the folders. Inside were surveillance photos of Patriots teammates, coaches, and their families. Photos taken in their homes, their private moments, their most vulnerable times. But it was a thick folder labeled insurance policies that made Marcus's legs give out. Inside were detailed dossiers on every significant person in Tom's life. Teammates who might challenge his position. Coaches who might question his decisions. Media members who wrote critical articles. Even some of his own family members. Each file contained the same elements. Personal secrets, financial vulnerabilities, family scandals, and most chilling of all, detailed plans for how to neutralize threats to TB12 brand integrity. Marcus's hands trembled as he read through the documents. Here was proof that Julian Edelman's brief stint in rehab had been orchestrated by Tom, who had planted drugs in Julian's car to teach him a lesson about loyalty. Here was evidence that several critical sports journalists had been blackmailed into writing favorable coverage. Here were bank records showing payments to private investigators who specialized in domestic intelligence gathering. And then Marcus found his own file. The folder was thick, filled with photos of Marcus at his apartment, at the grocery store, visiting his sick mother in Revere. There were copies of his immigration documents. Marcus had come from El Salvador when he was 12, and while he was now a legal resident. The file detailed every step of his family's journey to America, including some documentation issues that could still cause problems. But it was a handwritten note clipped to the front that made Marcus's blood freeze. Useful as leverage if needed. Family deportation risk equals 100% compliance. Emotional attachment to employer makes him ideal for long-term monitoring of household. Marcus sank into chair, his mind reeling. For 8 years, he'd thought he was working for a family that cared about him. Instead, he'd been an unwitting spy in their home, his vulnerable immigration status making him the perfect asset. Every meal he prepared, every conversation he'd overheard, every moment of trust, it had all been part of an elaborate surveillance operation. The beeping that had led him here wasn't from a security system. It was from one of the computers, alerting Tom to some new piece of intelligence his network had gathered. Marcus looked at the screen and saw a live feed of Patriots rookie quarterback Bailey Zapp's apartment. The young quarterback was having dinner with his girlfriend, completely unaware that his most private moments were being recorded. Marcus thought about all the times Tom had asked seemingly innocent questions about what he'd overheard during team gatherings at the house, about teammates' conversations, about coaches' concerns, about family drama that players shared in confidence. Marcus had thought Tom was just being friendly, showing interest in his team. Now he realized every detail had been carefully cataloged and weaponized. The scope of the operation was staggering. Files on NFL commissioners, team owners, media executives, and politicians. A web of surveillance and manipulation that had helped Tom navigate every challenge to his career and reputation. The deflated football scandal? Tom had known about the investigation weeks before it went public and had orchestrated his response. His seemingly miraculous comeback performances? They often came against teams whose coordinators had been subtly compromised through blackmail or financial pressure. Marcus found a ledger detailing payments to dozens of people. Equipment managers who would sabotage opposing teams' gear, referees who would make crucial calls in Tom's favor, medical staff who would provide inside information about injuries. The TB12 method wasn't just about diet and exercise. It was about controlling every variable through any means necessary. But it was a final folder that broke Marcus's heart completely. Inside were surveillance photos of his own family, his mother at her doctor's appointments, his sister picking up her children from school, his brother at a construction job. There were even recordings of his phone calls home, intimate conversations with his family that Tom's people had been monitoring for years. A sticky note on the folder read, "Maintain current arrangement. Subject's emotional investment makes termination unlikely, but family pressure points remain available if compliance issues arise." Marcus had never felt so betrayed, so utterly violated. The man he'd admired, the family he'd served faithfully, had been using him all along. Every kindness, every inclusion in family moments, every expression of gratitude, it had all been calculated manipulation designed to keep him compliant and useful. He stood up from the desk, his legs shaky with rage and fear. The beeping had stopped, but Marcus could hear something else now, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway upstairs. Tom was home early. Marcus quickly photographed as many documents as he could with his phone, his hands trembling so badly he could barely hold it steady. He needed evidence, proof of what he discovered. But as footsteps echoed across the floor above, he realized he was trapped. There was no way to get back upstairs without Tom seeing him. He turned off the lights and locked the door, slipping the key back onto its hook just as he heard Tom's voice calling down the stairs. "Marcus, you still here?" "Just finishing up in the kitchen," Marcus called back, his voice somehow steady despite his racing heart. He climbed the stairs slowly, forcing himself to appear calm. Tom was standing in the kitchen, still in his workout clothes, that familiar smile on his face. "Working late again?" You don't have to do that. You know, family comes first. The word family hit Marcus like a physical blow. He managed a nod, not trusting his voice. Everything okay? Tom asked, his quarterback instincts picking up on something off. You look a little pale. Just tired, Marcus managed. Long day. Tom studied him for a moment, and Marcus felt like those legendary football instincts were analyzing him, looking for tells. Finally, Tom nodded. Get some rest. Big day tomorrow. We're having some team executives over for dinner. Marcus nodded and began gathering his things, his hands shaking slightly as he packed his knife roll. Tom watched him with that same calculating look he wore when reading defenses on the field. Marcus, Tom said as he reached the door, you know you're like family to us, right? We trust you completely. The words were meant to be reassuring, but Marcus heard the underlying message loud and clear. He forced another nod and escaped into the night. In his car, Marcus sat in the darkness of the Brady driveway, his whole world spinning. Everything he believed about his life, his job, his place in the Brady family, it had all been a lie. He wasn't a trusted employee. He was a monitored asset. He wasn't part of their family. He was a useful tool with built-in leverage. But what could he do? Who would believe him? Tom Brady was America's sweetheart, the comeback king, the ultimate underdog who'd proven everyone wrong. Marcus was just an immigrant chef with a high school education. Even with the photos on his phone, who would take his word against the most beloved athlete in American sports? And then there was his family to consider. His mother needed her medical treatments that were expensive and required legal residency. His sister's children were American citizens, but deportation proceedings could tear their family apart anyway. Tom's files had made it clear that Marcus's compliance was expected, and the consequences of defiance were well understood. Marcus drove home to his small apartment in East Boston, his mind churning with impossible choices. In the morning, he would have to face Tom again, prepare his meals, serve his family, pretend that nothing had changed. But how could he look at Tom's children, knowing their father was capable of such manipulation? How could he continue to be part of a system that destroyed people's lives for the sake of football victories? The surveillance photos of his family haunted him most. His mother's proud smile as she talked about her son, who worked for Tom Brady. His nieces and nephews wearing Patriots jerseys to school. They had no idea they were being watched, cataloged, turned into leverage against someone they loved. That night, Marcus barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those computer monitors, those files, that handwritten note about his family's deportation risk. He thought about all the teammates who'd been manipulated, all the journalists who'd been silenced, all the innocent people who become collateral damage in Tom's quest for perfection. By morning, Marcus had made his decision. He arrived at the Brady house at his usual time, prepared Tom's usual breakfast, and went through the motions of his normal routine. But when Tom left for practice, Marcus sat down at the kitchen island and wrote his resignation letter. 3 words. I can't anymore. But he didn't leave it at that. Marcus also wrote a longer letter, one he would never send but needed to write for his own sanity. In it, he detailed everything he'd discovered, every violation of trust, every manipulation he'd unknowingly been part of. He wrote about the weight of carrying such knowledge, about the impossible choice between loyalty and truth, about the fear that would follow him for the rest of his life. He sealed both letters in an envelope and left them on Tom's pillow. Then Marcus Rivera walked out of the Brady mansion for the last time, carrying nothing but his knife roll and the devastating knowledge that heroes aren't always what they seem. 3 hours later, his phone started ringing. Tom's number appeared on the screen, then Giselle's, then numbers he didn't recognize. Marcus turned off his phone and drove to Logan Airport. The last anyone heard from Marcus Rivera. He was boarding a plane to El Salvador, returning to a country he'd left as a child but that suddenly felt safer than the one that had promised him dreams. The official story was simple. Marcus had suffered a family emergency and needed to return home indefinitely. Tom publicly wished him well and hired a new chef within a week. The transition was seamless, professional, without drama. But those who knew Marcus well noticed things. His social media accounts disappeared overnight. His apartment was cleared out by a moving company, with no forwarding address given. His phone number was disconnected, and attempts to reach him through family members were met with polite but firm responses that Marcus wished to be left alone. The few photos Marcus had managed to take in that basement room remained on a phone that now sat at the bottom of Boston Harbor, its secrets lost to the depths. Some secrets, Marcus realized, are too dangerous to expose, no matter how much the truth needs to be told. Some battles can't be won by people who have everything to lose and nothing to gain. Sometimes the only victory is escape. But late at night, when Tom Brady was alone in his mansion, he would sometimes walk down to that basement room and stare at the monitors showing other people's private lives. And he would think about Marcus Rivera, the chef who'd seen too much and chosen silence over destruction. Tom never had to worry about Marcus talking. The surveillance network had taught him to read people perfectly, and he knew that Marcus valued his family's safety more than any need for justice or vindication. Still, Tom had the locks changed on that basement door, just to be safe. Because in the game of maintaining perfection, there are no small details, no unnecessary precautions, and no trust that can't be weaponized. The TB12 method wasn't just about longevity on the football field. It was about controlling every variable in life itself. And Marcus Rivera had been just another variable in Tom Brady's perfect equation. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey into the dark side of perfection. Stories like this remind us that the people we idolize often have the most to hide, and sometimes the greatest courage comes from those who choose to walk away rather than become complicit in systems they can't fight. What would you have done in Marcus's position? Would you have tried to expose the truth, knowing the personal cost? Or would you have chosen the same path of silent escape? Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. And don't forget to hit that like button if the story kept you on the edge of your seat. Remember, sometimes the most shocking revelations come from the most trusted people in our lives. Until next time, stay vigilant. And remember, the truth is often stranger and more frightening than any fiction we could imagine.